Hey everyone, this is going to be an update video to one of my older ones onto the Chigorin defense because I have done plenty of research recently and I was able to find some really fascinating lines that I wanted to share with you. So basically how I would divide the material of this video, that is obviously about the London system, is that we're going to be dealing with the slides where black develops the knight on c6 and one of the ways of playing is by, well, first of all, developing the knight to f6, and the other way of playing these lines is by delaying that development, meaning black will focus on developing the light squared bishop early, and then they will have ideas to potentially bring this knight onto e7 in case we go for bishop to b5 move, which you will see that is actually a very nice idea that we can constantly use when black has already developed the knight to f6. So I think we'll start the video by covering the lines arising after knight f6. So then you will get a better understanding of why we do certain things instead of playing bishop to b5 as we usually like to. So after bishop f4, knight e6, e3. Here black already has a choice between either going bishop g4, bishop f5, or moving e6, playing with a closed bishop. And I think bishop g4 is one of the most common moves for black in this position, and the first thing that we want to do is we just want to see what black is really up to. We're going to be playing h3, and if they take on f3, we're generally going to be very happy having the bishop pair. I literally stopped the analysis here. You can continue with c3, knight d2, bishop d3, short castle, and generally I just feel like white is getting a little bit easier game without doing that much really. So in general, we're not going to be focusing when black just gives up the bishop for the knight, but constantly we'll see that bishop h5 is way more common, keeping the tension. And here, one of the key ideas to tackle this knight c6 setups, as I was mentioning in the introduction, is to develop this bishop all the way to b5, which may seem a little bit weird because usually in the London the bishop stays either on d3 or onto e2, but you have to understand that in this particular case this knight could actually be a huge objective for an attack, and we are already threatening a very deadly g4 followed by knight e5. As for example, if black plays e6, we're going to be covering a6 next as well, hitting our bishop. But if they go e6, the idea is to go g4, hitting the bishop, and then bishop g6, our knight is activating all of a sudden. And black seems to be lacking a good way of defending the knight on c6, and you already can notice how deadly this pin really is. So after knight e5, what I expect a lot of your opponents to do, according to the Lichess database at least, they will simply play bishop d6 and you can take twice and pick up the exchange with a winning position. But turns out black can find a better move, which is in this position to go for knight d7 instead. And this is a little bit of a computerish move. This is really the best line for black, I believe, in this whole Chigorin lines. And yeah, needless to say, I don't really expect any of your opponents to really find this, or even if they do, the positions are pretty unbalanced. But to be honest, I'd be happy playing white in this upcoming lines because we are still up a pawn, and black's composition doesn't really look all that obvious to me, even though, again, if you look at it with a computer, it's gonna say that the position is pretty unclear because we have overextended a little bit on the king side. But yeah, as I was saying, I usually think that this sort of overextension is gonna be providing us with more pros than cons. So I'm definitely a huge fan of it at the moment. And after knight e5, another move that they can go for is bishop d6, knight c6, and instead of taking, they could be going for this tricky queen d7 move, with the idea that well, we don't really have such a useful discovery, but we can take on a7, simply collecting the pawn, take on d6, take on c6, and then play bishop to d3. Yes, black can go queen b4, but after knight d2, black will be able to win one of the pawns, but we will still be up an extra pawn. So I think that is already quite enough for this bishop to g4 lines, and we can move on to what if black plays bishop to f5, and you will actually see that the ideas remain quite the same. But now that I'm thinking about it, I forgot to cover bishop g4, bishop b5, and then what if they play a6, because this is really important, because you may be wondering, well, what if we don't get in this g4 knight e5 kind of fun? Then what is the point of playing bishop b5? Well, here we can take on c6, doubling black's pawns, and you will see that here we have a theme that might not be the most common thing to do in the London, because usually you get taught to just pre-move playing c3, right? But here we're going to be playing the move c4, and this is very effective because not only it's opening up queen's path to a4, but also in the future a potential rook c1 move might be very annoying, putting pressure on the c file and on the c pawns. So after c4, for example, if black takes, that would be a very good example of why the triple pawns are really bad, and you should try to avoid them at all costs because they're really weak. Here, best would be to play knight e2, and after e6, queen a4, queen d5 is a way for black to sort of hang on to the pawns for the time being, but we can take on c7, and after bishop e7 castles, we can bring rook into c1, and we are ready to take that pawn on c4, and yeah, white is just up a pawn for no real compensation whatsoever. So instead of taking on c4, would be more normal for black to play e6, but then the same queen a4 would come in, and it's really important now that when bishop takes on f3, you take on c6 first with a check, and now black is forced to play knight d7. Obviously queen d7 will hang the a rook, so after knight d7 we can just recapture, we can play knight c3, and yeah, white is just completely winning in this position. So on queen a4, the trick is if they go queen d7, then knight e5 is the key move, and black is still dropping the c6 pawn, and white is winning. So yeah, just remember this idea. After we play bishop b5, we take on c6, and we combine it with c4, and yeah, white is just getting a lot of pressure on the queen side. So instead of this, black has another way of playing, which is e6, and this move is actually making our plan of going bishop to b5 less effective. And the main reason is because they can simply meet bishop b5 with bishop to d7, and we won't really be able to put pressure on that c6 knight anymore. So here against e6, I think we should simply switch to the more quote-unquote standard London play by going knight b to d2. And after bishop to d6, we can drop our bishop to g3. I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with this idea because we're inviting black to take, opening up our rook for the attack on the king side. And generally they won't take and they will make castle, but then we can simply play c3. Preparing to develop the bishop to d3 without allowing any potential knight b4 jumps, which could be annoying. And now one of the key ideas for black is to prepare this push with e5. And you have to understand that if you allow black to get into something like e5, they will have no problems whatsoever. Now you'll be getting positions similar to this, and yeah, I mean, it's not like the biggest disaster ever. Like, the positions should be close to equality, but you don't really get that much of an attack going as white, and yeah, there's no reason to allow this to happen basically. So instead, it's better to just watch out for this, and yeah, simply stop black from pushing e5 by going knight e5. This is a very common theme also in the main lines when they raise a pawn on c5 instead of c7, and black either goes for queen e7 or rook 8 preparing e5. Knight e5 is a very common move of just stopping black from pushing e5. Now you can see that his pieces are sort of cramped, and in this position, if they take on e5 with a bishop, we can take with a pawn, and after knight d7 we can just defend the e5 pawn, continue with bishop to d3, we can castle short, and yeah, white is having sort of a dream position for the London with all kinds of attacking ideas, such as could potentially bring the queen over to the king side, bring it to g4, bishop could activate using the h4 square, and so on. And yeah, there is a very common theme that a lot of the weaker players are just taking on e5 with a knight, and you could just win a free piece. This usually happens a lot in the London, by the way. And if they do not take immediately and they play knight d7, I've noticed that this move has been played in the Lichess database quite frequently. Here I found a very fascinating line, because you can go f4 and after f6, we're not gonna be going for the most normal move, which would be taking on d7, but instead we just go bishop to d3, and we are allowing black to take that knight on e5. And the main reason is that we're gonna be taking back with the pawn. The bishop is under attack, and if they simply drop the bishop, let's say to like e7, keeping the f8 square for the knight available for the defense, then white is just getting a very nice attack after something like queen h5. Already g6 would be leading to a winning attack for white after the bishop sack, and then we can castle. There's a big threat of rook f7, and on rook f8, the key idea to get a mating attack is to play bishop to f4, and yeah. As you can see, pointed out by the arrows, black is unable to find a good defense against this deadly rook lift of coming from f3 to h3. So yeah, this would be already giving white a very quick win. And if they instead defend with knight f8, then we can go h4. This is a very important move, preparing knight f3 coming into g5. And if black continues with like queen d7, well, you have to really stop here and ask yourself, what is up with this position? Because you may be trying to calculate it till the very end while going for the piece sack, but this is not really how the attack is going here, because the position is not really all that concrete. It's not like you sack a piece, you see it till the mate. It's more about sort of a positional decision in a way, even though it might sound strange to say it, but you have to kind of understand that black's got a lot of pieces that are not really gonna be able to defend the king side. And yeah, something that black can try to do is to launch some queenside counterattack with b5. And the thing is, we're not really gonna even bother with taking on b5 or opening up files for black, but we can focus on our own play with rook d f1. And we are already having a huge threat of taking on f8 with the rook. Notice that whenever black plays something like g6, by the way, you can play queen h6, and then h5 is becoming quite a big threat. And here, if they continue the attack on the queen side with b4, then we just get very nice attacking lines after rook takes on f8. And the reason is that if they take with a king, rook is coming in. If bishop blocks, because obviously king g8 is running into mate on h7, we can take, and now the bishop sack is coming in, and we do get the checkmate on the g7. So instead of this, if they take with a bishop, then there will be another pretty standard checkmating theme with this mate on h7. And yeah, it's just that black is really struggling to defend this type of positions. Even though he's up a piece, you really have to ask yourself, well, how is he going to defend there with these pieces? After we go h4, we have pretty obvious threats. We're going to be castling long as well, bringing the rook to f1, and meanwhile, he's simply lacking space. So yeah, this is really nice for white, and I thought this is a very fascinating idea that I want to share it with you. And instead of this, by the way, black would be honestly better here to give back the piece by taking on e5, but white is still better after taking, and then the key idea is to take on h7, because the follow-up would be a queen check, and on king g8, we actually have an even better move than taking on e5 immediately, which is to castle. And the main reason is that if we take, then queen h4, g3, queen f6 makes it harder for us to continue the attack. So short castle is just much better, because black's knight cannot really escape, since if it goes back to c6, we get a mating attack with knight f3, knight g5, and either mate on like f7 or h7 next. So after castle, really the best move is to play queen e7, but we can take on e5, and you see that we have managed to castle. We have occupied the f-file, and black is unable to stop our queen from staying into the middle of the board. And yeah, white is just much better. You can double up next with like rook f4, rook a, f1, and yeah, white is just doing very well. So yeah, I think that should be pretty much it about this first part of the Chigorin defense when they develop both knights, meaning they go to c6 and to f6. And now it's time to dive into the second part of this video, which will be dedicated to the lines where they play knight c6 first, and then they are delaying developing this knight to f6. And this is gonna be in particular useful mainly against our bishop to b5 ideas, because well, if we for instance go e3, and then after e6 we go for the same bishop to b5 plans, you will see that knight g to e7 will be a pretty bad counter for us, because yeah, we can't really use the same plans as effectively as we did against the plans where the knight was sitting already on f6. So for this reason, against bishop g4 e6, we're gonna be playing h3 first. As a rule of thumb, as I was saying, whenever they go for this, just question the bishop, go h3. If they take, again, we're happy having the bishop pair, go c3, knight e2, bishop's coming to d3, castle short, should be okay. And after bishop to h5, we're gonna be using this idea of pushing c4 once again. And for example, if they yeah, just stay flexible, playing bishop d7 with the idea of developing this knight into e7, we can trade once, and after queen takes, I really like this plan of going knight b to d2, which is kind of overprotecting this knight on f3, and it has the plan that we can later on expand on the queen side with c5 and then a3 b4, and yeah, we're just gonna grab a lot of space, and black is gonna find it pretty uncomfortable dealing with this threat of going b5, eventually kicking his knight. So white is again slightly better in these lines, and if instead they develop the knight to f6, then we're gonna be playing c5, which doesn't look all that common, since this move is usually played when it's hitting something, like for example a bishop on d6, or it comes with a tempo. But here it's very good because it's preparing this idea to develop the bishop all the way to b5. And this is in particular very effective because, as I was saying, the knight is already on f6, and if they castle, we can take on c6 and go g4, which is a very powerful move. And I will show you a plan that is very effective here. We can go knight e5, hitting the pawn, and on queen e8, knight c3, we can just advance our h pawn, and the light square bishop is a big target in these lines. And yeah, if black has to weaken even further by pushing the h pawn next just to save the bishop, then we're gonna be able to take advantage of it by either going g5 or h5, or take that bishop. There's so many ways that we can punish it. So yeah, I think that should be yeah, pretty much a quick guide on bishop g4 without knight f6. And if they play bishop to f5, this is actually one of the most common lines, I would say, for lower rated games. I think my students used to run into this a lot, with the idea that after e3 their opponents will play knight b4. And the quick fix would be to play knight a3 in this position, and just play c3 next, kick this knight. White is okay, but something even better is to play bishop b5 first. And the idea is that on c6 we can play bishop a4, and this is an even nicer way to protect the pawn on c2. And there is still one tricky line that you need to be familiar with, which is queen a5, because you don't want to just play bishop to b3, because that will allow black to take on c2 with a double check, and black will be completely winning. So instead, you should be playing this knight c3 move, defending the bishop, and also making sure that we are closing this diagonal. And white is just better in these lines. After knight f6, we can kick back the knight, go b4, then open up the position with b5, we can take with the bishop, and yeah, white is just much better. We have a really nice leading development. We can continue with knight e5 and rook b1 ideas. Queen d3 also is something that we're looking forward to, with ideas to open up the position with e4. Remember that whenever your opponent is behind in development, you should be looking for ways to open up the position and try to take advantage of his king that is still in the center. So yeah, white is just doing very well here. And yeah, you may be wondering, well, what if they don't go for this crazy queen a5 move and they just play kind of normal with knight f6? Then I think the best way to actually deal with this is to play knight e5. And the idea is to meet e6 with a3, hitting the knight, and then we have a very powerful pawn storm on the king side by going g4 and h4. And there's a big threat of going h5, trapping the bishop, because whenever they go bishop e4, we can just trap that bishop with f3. And if they move the h-pawn, well, that's going to create a huge weakness on g6 that we are going to be targeting, bringing our bishop back into the game next with bishop to c2. And yeah, black will have a really hard time defending that pawn. So yeah, that is already really terrible when they get into this huge weakness on g6. Yeah, you're doing very well. And instead of knight b4, they could also play more normal with like e6. And here, I think we can actually just keep it simple. No need to play c4 anymore. I just like going bishop to d3. And if they take, we can take with a queen. We're going to be following a game played by Boris Grachev, one of the biggest London experts. And after bishop to d6, we can just use this idea. Playing bishop g3, again inviting black to take on g3, opening up the h file for our rook if they want to. And if they play knight f6, then we can use c4 idea this time, because on takes we can take with a queen, and after castles knight c3. White is doing very well because we're having these ideas of pushing in the center with e4. So yeah, I think that is pretty much it for this video. Yeah, just try to look on the board and see which plan is your opponent going for, because as I was saying, the plans are a little bit different if they are delaying developing the knight on f6. But if you know, a lot of people do, if they start by developing the knight on f6 and you see that both knights are there, then this gives us a great opportunity of playing with e3. Then the bishop is coming into b5 combined with knight e5 ideas. Yeah, I think it should really boost your win rate quite a bit in the London system. If you're playing this particularly in ratings under 1800, I'm saying this because if you're playing the London in higher ranks, nobody is really going to be playing the knight on c6 anymore. They always going to have the pawn on c5, or they're going to be playing something else, because this line is really very common in the lower rated games. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Yeah, if you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you get notified whenever I post a new video just like this one. And I like to thank you for your time, and I'll see you around on the channel. Take care.